Kiara Holman had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift when a man claiming to be neighborhood security pulled a gun on her, never realizing she was the new sheriff of the county. The fluorescent lights inside the Shelby County Sheriff's Department flickered as Kiara Holman clocked out. It had been a rough 12-hour shift full of paperwork, a couple of drunk and disorderly calls, and one heartbreaking domestic dispute. Kiara slipped her jacket over her uniform, zipped it halfway, and walked through the back lot to her car, a dusty silver Ford Explorer that had seen better days. The night air in Columbiana, Alabama was thick, warm, and heavy with the smell of honeysuckle. Kiara didn't mind it much. Anything was better than sitting at her desk another minute. She tossed her bag onto the passenger seat, pulled her hair into a quick bun, and turned the ignition. The old SUV grumbled to life. The roads were nearly empty. A few streetlights buzzed overhead, but otherwise it was just Kiara and the dark. She loved these drives, quiet, simple, a moment to catch her breath before stepping back into her world. Her new house, tucked away in a small development on the edge of town, felt like a fresh start. She had saved for years to buy it, a modest 3-bedroom with a big front porch and a yard she still hadn't gotten around to mowing. As she turned into her subdivision, Hickory Estates, she glanced at the glowing dashboard clock. 11:46 p.m., almost home. Almost time to kick off her boots, pour a glass of sweet tea, and binge some mindless TV. Kiara smiled to herself and thought, one more minute, that's it. The houses all looked alike in the dark. Neat lawns, trimmed bushes, identical mailboxes. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Or at least it was supposed to be. Her headlights swept across her driveway, and something caught her attention. A figure. A man standing near the edge of her yard, arms crossed as if waiting. For a split second, she wondered if he was a neighbor. Maybe someone needing help? But the second she pulled in and slowed to a stop, he moved directly into the path of her car. He was white, maybe in his late 40s, wearing jeans and a faded polo shirt. No uniform, no badge, no reflective vest, just a frown deep enough to cut stone. Kiara's instincts kicked in fast. She left the engine running, one hand near her gear shift, just in case. She cracked the window halfway. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice even but firm. The man stepped closer, peering into her car like he was inspecting stolen goods. "You live here?" he barked. Kiara blinked, thrown by the tone. "Yeah, I do." He squinted, clearly not convinced. "We've had problems. Break-ins. You can't just be parking wherever you want." Kiara felt a small flicker of anger, but kept it buried deep. "Sir, I just got off work. I live right there," she said, nodding toward her front door, where a porch light glowed weakly. Instead of stepping back, he planted his feet wider, arms folding tighter across his chest. "I'm with the HOA security team," he said proudly, although he flashed no ID. "Need to see some proof you belong here." Kiara studied him closely. His hands were empty, but something about his posture set off alarms. People pretending to have authority were dangerous, and people who needed to feel powerful, even more so. "I'll get my key out and open the door," Kiara said slowly. "You'll see." But the man, Leonard Vance, though she didn't know his name yet, wasn't interested in waiting. He took another step forward, crowding her window. "You need to show me something right now," he demanded, voice rising, sharp and ugly. Kiara reached slowly for her badge inside her jacket, thinking maybe a glimpse would settle him down. But she didn't even get halfway before his hand dropped to his waistband. And she saw it. A gun, small, black, and pointed straight at her. Her breath caught. Her heart hammered once, hard and loud. She didn't flinch, didn't move. Years of training froze her in place, and probably saved her life. "Get out of the car," he ordered. Kiara kept her hands visible on the steering wheel. "You're making a mistake," she said calmly, the words steady, even though adrenaline poured through her. The man's jaw clenched. He wasn't listening. His eyes darted nervously around the street, as if expecting someone to back him up. But Kiara knew she needed to play this carefully, or this night could end with blood on the pavement. Kiara sat motionless, hands firm on the wheel, eyes locked on Leonard Vance. She could see the slight tremble in his arms, the way his finger twitched near the trigger. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was scared. And scared men with guns were unpredictable. "Sir, I live here," she said again, slower this time, like speaking to a skittish animal. "I'm not trespassing. I'm not causing any trouble." Leonard didn't budge. His knuckles whitened around the grip. "You need to get out right now," he barked again, voice cracking just enough to reveal his nerves. "I'm not asking you again." Kiara weighed her options fast. Getting out of the car could be dangerous. Staying put wasn't much better. Either way, she needed to control the pace. "Okay," she said, tone measured. "I'm reaching for my wallet. Slow and steady. It's right here in the door pocket." She moved deliberately, no sudden gestures, making sure both her hands were visible the whole time. She kept her voice steady, narrating her movements like she was training a rookie. Leonard twitched when she reached down, but he didn't fire. Kiara pulled out her department ID and badge, lifting it slowly to the window. "See this? Shelby County Sheriff's Office. I'm law enforcement." For a beat, Leonard's face blanked. He wasn't prepared for that. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, searching for something to say. "You think that's gonna scare me?" he finally spat out, louder now, like volume could cover his mistake. "Anyone can make a fake badge. I don't care who you say you are." Kiara could feel her patience thinning, but she kept her tone cool. "If you're with the HOA," she said carefully, "you should already know who lives here. My name's Kiara Holman. I closed on this house 3 months ago. You can check the directory if you really care." Leonard shifted on his feet, gun still pointed, eyes darting toward the house like he was trying to remember if he'd seen her before. The doubt was creeping in. She needed it to grow. "Put the weapon down," Kiara said, still calm, still firm. "You are threatening a peace officer in her own home. That's a felony. You don't want to take this any further." He shook his head violently, sweat shining on his forehead under the porch light. "You're lying. You're just saying that because you got caught." Kiara could feel it, the conversation teetering on a knife's edge. One wrong move and this man could pull the trigger out of pride, fear, or both. "I'm going to open my door now," she said, steady and clear. "Nice and slow. I'm getting out so we can talk face to face." Leonard didn't respond. His hand trembled just slightly, but he didn't lower the gun. Kiara slowly opened the car door with her left hand, keeping her right raised where he could see it. She stepped out, body angled sideways to present less of a target, just as she'd been trained years ago in the academy. The porch light threw her into full view, her dark hair pulled tight, her work pants, the visible edge of her badge clipped to her belt. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like exactly what she was. A tired woman just trying to get home after a long shift. Leonard hesitated. His eyes flickered over her belt, the radio attached to it, the unmistakable authority of her stance. Kiara took a slow step forward, palms out. "You need to think about what you're doing," she said, her voice low enough that he had to focus to hear it. "Right now you're committing a felony with a deadly weapon, against an officer, in front of security cameras," she added, nodding toward the visible doorbell cam on her porch. Leonard flinched like he'd been slapped. For a moment, the air between them felt electric, tight enough to snap. "Don't ruin your life over a mistake," Kiara said softly. Leonard's chest heaved. His hand sagged an inch. Confusion battled anger across his face. He was realizing, maybe too late, that he wasn't the good guy in this story. But Kiara knew that even hesitation could be dangerous if she didn't steer this moment carefully toward a safer end. The seconds stretched long and thin, the kind of tension you could almost taste. Kiara stayed rooted to the ground, eyes trained on Leonard's every twitch. He hadn't lowered the gun all the way, just enough to show doubt had cracked through his certainty. "You don't want this," Kiara said again, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had stared down real danger before. "You're gonna regret it if you keep going." Leonard's hand shook. His breathing grew louder, faster. Kiara watched his pupils flicker, scanning for an escape that didn't exist. "I'm not the enemy," she continued carefully. "I'm your neighbor. I mow that lawn. I pay HOA dues just like you. You want to know what I do when I'm not at work? I plant tomatoes in the backyard. I walk my dog down this street. Just like you." For a moment, Leonard faltered. The barrel of the gun dipped a few more inches. His face twisted. Not just with confusion now, but something deeper, shame. But pride is a stubborn thing. "I don't have time for this," he snapped suddenly, though his voice betrayed him, all brittle and shaky. "This neighborhood's been going downhill. We're just trying to protect it." Kiara took a tiny step closer, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her eardrums. "By pulling guns on people pulling into their own driveways?" she asked, eyebrows raised just enough to challenge him without pushing too hard. Leonard opened his mouth to argue, and then it happened. Across the street, a porch light flicked on. An elderly woman in a robe peered through her window, holding a cordless phone up to her ear. Leonard caught the movement out of the corner of his eye. His head jerked around, and for one dangerous second, the gun swung with him, away from Kiara. She moved. Not fast, not aggressively, just enough. Her left hand dipped to her radio, clipped to her belt under her jacket. She thumbed it once, speaking low but clear. "Unit 4, requesting immediate backup. Hickory Estates Subdivision. Officer threatened with firearm. Suspect male, mid-40s, armed." The dispatcher responded instantly. Calm. Clipped. "Backup en route. ETA, 3 minutes." 3 minutes. A lifetime in a moment like this. Leonard turned back toward her, confusion deepening. He realized she'd called for help. And for the first time, real fear flashed in his eyes. "You called the cops?" he shouted, as if the irony hadn't fully registered yet. Kiara nodded once. "They're coming. Right now." Leonard's arm sagged even more, the weight of the gun dragging his hand down. His whole body seemed to deflate in front of her, like a balloon leaking air. "You could have just cooperated," he muttered, almost childishly, almost to himself. "I did," Kiara said softly. "You're the one who made it worse." Leonard stumbled backward a few steps, lowering the weapon all the way. He didn't drop it, but he wasn't aiming it anymore either. His shoulders drooped, chest heaving like he'd just run a marathon. Kiara stood still, watching him carefully, every sense sharp and alert. She didn't dare turn her back on him, not even now. Too much could still go wrong. From the distance, the faint but growing wail of sirens floated through the night air. Leonard heard them too. His head whipped around toward the sound, panic flashing across his face. He looked at Kiara again, as if weighing some desperate decision, some last-minute way to undo everything. "Don't!" Kiara warned, voice cutting through the humid air like a blade. "Don't make this any worse!" He didn't. Leonard dropped to his knees right there on the driveway, the gun clattering onto the pavement a few inches in front of him. He raised both hands, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. Across the street, more porch lights blinked on. Curtains twitched. Doors creaked open. Neighbors, people who had probably waved at Leonard in passing for years, now stood frozen, watching the scene unfold like a car crash they couldn't look away from. Kiara stayed where she was, arms loose at her sides, heart still pounding hard enough to shake her ribs. But she knew the real confrontation wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The flashing red and blue lights lit up Hickory Estates like a carnival gone wrong. 2 cruisers roared into the cul-de-sac, tires crunching the pavement, sirens cutting off the moment they pulled to a stop. Kiara stayed perfectly still, arms loose and relaxed, as officers Benton and Ruiz jumped out, hands on their weapons. Benton, a tall, broad-shouldered man with sandy brown hair, clocked the scene fast. Leonard on his knees, weapon on the ground, Kiara standing between him and the house. "Drop any other weapons!" Benton barked, taking command. Leonard, wild-eyed, jabbered, "I'm with the HOA. I was protecting the neighborhood. She was suspicious." Ruiz approached cautiously, cuffing Leonard without another word. Leonard didn't resist. His arms flopped behind him like he was barely connected to his own body. Benton edged closer to Kiara, squinting in the harsh cruiser lights. His hand hovered near his belt until he recognized her. Holman? He asked, disbelief plain in his voice. Yeah, Kiara answered, voice even. Had a warm welcome tonight. Benton exhaled hard, rubbing a hand down his face. Jesus, I thought you were on day shifts now. Shift swap, Kiara said simply. Leonard twisted his neck around, squinting up at Kiara, real confusion setting in. Wait, you are a cop? Kiara turned her full attention to him now, calm but unflinching. Sheriff? She corrected. I just finished a 12-hour shift and you blocked me in my own driveway and pulled a gun on me because you didn't recognize my face. Leonard's mouth opened, but no words came out. In the background, a few neighbors gathered in loose, awkward clusters on the sidewalks, watching, whispering. Some held phones, recording. You don't even live on this street, do you? Kiara asked him, tilting her head slightly. You're from over on Carson Lane. Leonard blinked. Stunned. She was right. She knew the community better than he did. Benton crouched, bagging Leonard's weapon carefully. He's carrying without a permit, he said, frowning. Unregistered. Kiara nodded once, lips tightening. Not surprising. Leonard tried again, voice cracking. I thought I was protecting people. We had that car break-in 2 weeks ago. People said to watch for anything suspicious. And what exactly made me suspicious? Kiara asked. Her tone was low but razor-sharp now, cutting through the thick night air. Was it the time of night? The car? Or was it just me sitting behind the wheel? Leonard opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. He closed it again, sagging under the weight of what he'd done. Officer Ruiz led Leonard toward the back seat of the cruiser. Benton stayed back with Kiara, shoulders tense. You good? Benton asked quietly. Eyes searching hers, Kiara nodded. Yeah, been through worse. But the truth was, it stung in ways she couldn't easily put into words. Not the fear that she could handle. It was the disappointment, the sour knowledge that even in her own driveway, wearing a badge and a gun, doing everything right, she still had to prove she belonged. She glanced around. Neighbors she hadn't even met yet stood frozen, unsure whether to step closer or retreat inside their houses. Kiara made eye contact with an older man across the street. Mr. Halpern, she thought his name was, who gave her a slow, awkward nod. Not an apology. Just a nod. Go get some rest, Benton said after a beat. We'll handle it from here. Thanks, Kiara said. Her voice came out rougher than she meant. As Benton turned back toward his cruiser, Kiara stood there for a moment longer, staring at the place where Leonard had knelt, where his gun had skittered across the concrete. The porch light above her door still burned steadily, casting a tired glow over everything. She exhaled slowly, feeling the tension bleed from her muscles inch by inch. But even as the patrol cars pulled away, leaving streaks of red and blue across the pavement, Kiara knew this wasn't something that would disappear overnight. The neighborhood looked different now. Same houses, same neat lawns, but everything felt heavier somehow, as if the night had shifted and couldn't shift back. Kiara locked her car and walked slowly toward her front door, hyper-aware of the stairs behind curtains and half-opened doors. Every step felt louder than it should have, crunching on the gravel lining her walkway. Before she could reach the porch, a voice called out from across the street. Miss Holman? Kiara turned to see a woman hurrying over, mid-50s maybe, short hair, pajama pants tucked into sneakers. She held a phone in one hand like a shield. I'm sorry, the woman blurted, voice shaky. I didn't realize it was you. I just saw... I thought you might need help. Kiara offered a small, tired smile. Thank you for calling, she said. It could have gotten a lot worse. The woman's face crumpled with guilt. This neighborhood's supposed to be safe, she whispered. I don't know what he was thinking. Kiara didn't respond. She just gave a small nod and turned back toward her door. No lecture needed. The truth was written all over the woman's face. At her porch, Kiara unlocked the door, but before stepping inside, she glanced back once more. More neighbors had gathered now, small groups clinging to the shadows, too curious or too embarrassed to come closer. Among them, she spotted Leonard's wife, standing near the edge of her yard, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her world together. Kiara's stomach twisted, not out of sympathy for Leonard, but because she knew tonight had shattered more than just one man's pride. It would ripple through families, friendships, block parties, committee meetings. Things wouldn't go back to normal here, not completely. She stepped inside her house, closed the door softly behind her, and leaned back against it. For a moment, Kiara just stood there, letting the stillness settle around her. The house smelled faintly of laundry detergent and lemon-scented cleaner. It was supposed to feel like home. Tonight, it felt like a fortress. She peeled off her jacket, tossing it over a chair, and sank onto the couch. The quiet was deafening. Her heart still hadn't completely slowed down, beating against her ribs like it had forgotten how to do anything else. On the coffee table, her phone buzzed. A text from Benton. "He's being booked now. Charges: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, impersonating an officer, unlawful possession of a firearm." "Sleep easy." Kiara stared at the screen for a long moment. Sleep easy? It sounded simple, but there was nothing easy about any of this. Another buzz, this time from Deputy Chief Holloway. "Proud of you. Handled it right. Not everyone would have stayed that calm." Kiara smiled faintly, the smallest flicker of warmth in her chest. Still, pride wasn't what she felt most. It was sadness, exhaustion, the deep kind, the kind that seeped into your bones. She tossed the phone onto the couch beside her and stared up at the ceiling, willing her body to relax. Minutes ticked by. Finally, a soft knock rattled her front door. Kiara sat up, muscles tensing again. For a heartbeat, she considered ignoring it. But habits won out. She walked back to the door and peered through the peephole. It was another neighbor. A young man she vaguely recognized from seeing him mow his lawn shirtless on weekends. He held something awkwardly in his hands. Kiara opened the door halfway. "Hey," he said, clearing his throat. I just wanted to say sorry for what happened." Kiara raised an eyebrow, waiting. "And, He shifted his weight, thrusting a plate of cookies toward her like a peace offering. "My wife made these. Said you might want something sweet." Kiara stared at the plate, then at him, and for the first time that night, she felt something loosen inside her chest. A thread of real, human kindness. "Thanks," she said, accepting the plate. The man ducked his head, relief written all over his face. "We're glad you're here." "For real." Kiara nodded, and as he turned and walked back across the street, she closed the door gently behind her. But she knew healing would take more than cookies and awkward apologies. It would take time, patience, and a whole lot of uncomfortable conversations. Morning came too early. Kiara woke up to sunlight bleeding around the edges of her bedroom blinds. Her body ached in that deep, invisible way, not from bruises or injury, but from sheer mental weight. She rolled over, grabbing her phone off the nightstand. Messages. Dozens of them. Deputy Chief Holloway again. Benton. A few other deputies from neighboring counties. Even her mother had texted after hearing rumors on Facebook. She swiped through them absently, the words blurring together. "Proud of you. Are you okay? Call if you need anything." Some messages carried warmth. Others carried the sting of pity. She sat up slowly, rubbing the heel of her hand over her face. Today was supposed to be her one day off. Now, she wasn't so sure. Kiara dragged herself into the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. While it brewed, she wandered onto the front porch, cradling her mug. The neighborhood looked the same. Kids on bikes, a few dads wrestling trash cans down to the curb, birds chirping from the trees. You wouldn't know anything had happened just hours ago. But she could feel it, that shift. People glanced at her house longer than usual. Conversations stopped when she stepped outside. Smiles looked a little too tight around the edges. Across the street, Mrs. Douglas, the woman who had called 911, waved hesitantly. Kiara raised her coffee cup in return. A truce, maybe. A beginning. The door next to Mrs. Douglas's opened, and Leonard's wife came out, her face pale and tight. She clutched a set of keys in one hand, gripping them so hard her knuckles turned white. She looked like someone who hadn't slept either. Kiara watched her walk stiffly to a car parked in the driveway. No wave, no glance, just a hurried, head-down scramble to leave the neighborhood for a while. Kiara didn't blame her. Rumors would spread fast. People would pick sides. Some would say Leonard had made an honest mistake. Others would say he was dangerous. Very few would admit that both could be true at the same time. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the bitterness anchor her. Later that afternoon, Benton called. "You're gonna get reporters sniffing around," he said, voice low. "Someone leaked it to the local news already," Kiara sighed, pressing her forehead against the cool glass of her living room window. "Figures. You don't have to talk to them," Benton added. Up to you. She knew that. But part of her also knew she couldn't just disappear into her house and pretend nothing had happened. That's how problems stayed buried. And she hadn't survived all she had just to stay silent. "Let them come," she said finally. "They'll probably get it wrong, but at least people will start asking the right questions." Benton chuckled dryly. "You always did like stirring up trouble." Kiara smiled despite herself. "Only when it needs stirring." After she hung up, she sat back on the couch and thought about everything. Not just Leonard, but the way fear twisted people, made them lash out at what they didn't understand. How easy it was to put someone in a box they didn't belong in, just because of a uniform they didn't expect, or a skin color they didn't recognize in their neighborhood. It hurt. But it also showed her how much work still needed to be done. Not with laws or policies, but with hearts. Her mind drifted back to Leonard, kneeling on the concrete, gun on the ground, looking like a man who had finally seen himself clearly for the first time. Regret burned in his face even before the cuffs snapped around his wrists. Maybe, just maybe, he would think differently from now on. Maybe others would, too. Maybe. Kiara drained the last sip of coffee and stood up, stretching until her back popped. The sun was high now, warm and relentless. It lit up the whole street. Every crack in the sidewalk, every chipped mailbox, every broken story hidden behind those tidy front doors. But Kiara knew the real work wouldn't be done by hiding from the light. It would be done by standing in it, day after day, no matter how heavy it felt. That evening, as the heat finally broke and a soft breeze stirred the trees, Kiara sat back out on her porch with a fresh cup of coffee. No armor, no badge, no uniform, just herself. The sky stretched wide overhead, streaked pink and gold. Kids laughed somewhere down the street, their voices carrying lightly on the breeze. Cars came and went. Life somehow kept moving. Kiara thought about the choices people made when they were scared, about the faces she'd seen. Leonard's panicked, crumbling face. The faces peering through blinds, weighing whether to watch or to help. Her own face, reflected back at her in the window, steady but worn. Fear made people dangerous, but it also made them human. It could close a mind just as easily as it could crack one open if you were willing to sit with it long enough. She leaned back in her chair, stretching her legs out across the porch. A neighbor jogged by, shooting her a brief, nervous smile. Kiara nodded back, offering the smallest bridge of forgiveness. She knew she couldn't change people overnight. Some folks would cling to their fear until the end. Some would pretend nothing happened. But a few, just a few, might look a little harder next time. Might think before they grabbed a weapon, before they let a lifetime of assumptions shove someone into the wrong box. And that mattered. One neighbor at a time, one street at a time. That's how real change came. Slow, stubborn, and steady. Kiara's phone buzzed again, vibrating across the table. A local reporter asking for an interview. She stared at it for a moment, weighing her exhaustion against the importance of speaking out. She tapped out a reply. "Tomorrow, noon. My porch. Let them come. Let the world hear the truth. Not the rumors, not the easy story, because the truth was complicated. The truth didn't fit neatly into headlines or hashtags. It was messy, uncomfortable, full of people who didn't always know better until it was too late. But it deserved to be heard anyway. Kiara took another sip of coffee, feeling the bitterness settle low and warm in her chest. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't fearless. She was just tired. And tired was sometimes exactly when the real work began. As the sun slipped below the rooftops and the first stars blinked awake, Kiara made herself a quiet promise. She would stay visible. She would stay human. She would not let one man's fear, or her own, make her small. Because sometimes courage wasn't about chasing bad guys or charging into danger. Sometimes it was just about showing up the next day, standing on your own front porch, making eye contact, smiling when it was easier to hide, teaching, quietly by example, that the world didn't have to stay the way it was. And maybe, just maybe, somebody watching would choose to be a little braver too. If you took something from Kiara's story today, if it made you feel, made you think, or just made you pause, take a moment to share it. Maybe it's a conversation you need to have. Maybe it's a small change you can make. Whatever it is, don't let it pass by unnoticed. And if you want to hear more real stories that challenge, teach, and connect us, don't forget to subscribe. We'll be here, telling them, one at a time.